Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 6th of November. As always, we hope you're watching weather.gov/Alaska tonight or arh.noaa.gov for some of your updates. Of course, in the Bering Sea, we've got a lot of information coming your way about the storm moving and expanding into the western Bering there. You can make sure you stay tuned on Marine VHF as well and NOAA Weather Radio. The weather info line's open at 800-472-0391. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube during the day. After this show, a little bit later in the evening on alaskapublic.org, you'll find the complete broadcast there. So if you miss it, just remember you can get it that way or by typing in AKwx TV to your search bar on YouTube. You can find the complete forecast there. Probably a little bit better for you in the bush and around coastal communities where your cell phone service is limited or maybe a little bit on the expensive side, no problem. Find the afternoon update from NWS Anchorage, which is about 2.5 minutes long, and on YouTube as well. Go to NWS Anchorage on the search bar there in YouTube, and you can find those short and sweet little surface chart updates there, about 2.5 minutes long. So probably a little bit more of what you're looking for in the mid-afternoon. Now, up across coastal villages there around Kaktovik and areas on the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, a winter weather advisory continues again until midnight. Still looking at some pretty strong winds. The winds around the north coast have been pretty blustery all day. Places like Dead Horse, Nuiqsut, and Barter Island have seen gusts anywhere from about 40 miles per hour to almost 48 miles per hour. The strongest of which was around Dead Horse earlier this afternoon. Now, those stronger easterly winds will likely reduce visibility with blowing snow. Visibility could drop down to a half mile or so, and those strong winds are expected to continue as we head into the midnight hours. So a winter weather advisory until about midnight there. Now, a little bit further out west, high wind warning is posted from Friday morning at 9 o'clock until Saturday morning at 9 o'clock for the areas from Kiska out toward Attu and Shimmy for the western Aleutians. We're talking about wind gusts coming in from the south, sustained around 75 miles per hour with gusts upwards of 80 to 90 miles per hour. That'll continue again at least through Saturday morning before things start to diminish somewhat. And still, the winds are going to be fairly strong as we go through Saturday. But the worst of it will likely be from around 9 o'clock in the morning Friday until 9 o'clock in the morning Saturday, which is when the warning is in effect there. Areas east of that, you are not under any wind advisories or warnings at this time. However, many of the marine areas are under storm force or hurricane force wind warnings north of Adak and Atka and west into the western Bering offshore zones, as well as coastal waters around Attu, Shemya, and Kiska there. So make sure you're up to date on that. We'll talk about the marine weather here in just a few minutes, but wanted to show you a picture of where Nuri is right now. Our satellite imagery is starting to come back across the Pacific, and this is what Nuri is doing right now. It's well south of the Kamchatka Peninsula. It has left eastern Asia and is making a beeline for the western Bering Sea and the western Aleutians. The forward speed on this is pretty impressive, and as it moves further and further north, it's losing its tropical characteristics. That means it's not a warm core system anymore. You're saying, what does that mean? It means the storm is using the warm ocean water and the air that it was a lot closer to in the equator. Well, as it moves northward, it loses the potential to do that, of course, and starts drawing in more cold from places like Siberia and eastern Russia. As it does that, it changes into a cold core system, so it's no longer a hurricane or a typhoon. It's just a very strong low-pressure system, one that we see in this time of the year in the Bering frequently. However, this storm seems to be a lot stronger and also has kind of an extra little oomph with it thanks to the jet stream roaring overhead from about 175 to maybe even as high as 200 knots. So with all of that in the right place, the ingredients are here for this storm to rapidly intensify as it moves into the western Bering Sea. Now, closer to home, we don't see Nuri on the satellite picture right now, or the remnants of it anywhere close to Alaska, but we do have some stronger storms to talk about. One of those has been working over southeast. The winds today have been a little bit on the stronger side. Those are settling down, and we might have the winds come up again as we get into Saturday. Another wave of low pressure been south of Kodiak Island is wrapping an occlusion around the open waters of the Gulf, and the winds coming across the coastal areas of the northern Gulf will probably be picking up. Same goes for Kodiak Island and the Cook Inlet. Starting tonight and into tomorrow, areas are looking at some gales and storm force winds across the region. So this is not Nuri, and we are not expecting impacts from the remnants of Nuri or that strong storm in the west to make it into the Gulf anytime soon. This is a totally different system. Across land, a relatively clear sky. You wouldn't tell that by the infrared satellite picture, though, picking up cold air across most areas. But if you look across the north slope, you can see that east to westerly flow moving out toward Barrow. You can see relatively clear conditions, although cold, across the northern Bering, and a broad area of low pressure across the middle Bering Sea. Most of that is just wrapping around a very weak low pressure system here that's probably stirring up the winds and waves just a little bit, but the bulk of the weather is yet to come in the west. Here's a look at the satellite picture one more time, and we'll let this run all the way through. You can see southeast has seen some improving weather there. Juneau picked up about a ½ inch of rain today from some of the moisture still working through. It looked like rain was still hovering over Yakutat and Haines earlier today. And we'll start to see more and more cloud cover working fairly quickly through the western Aleutians starting tonight. The winds will come up, and you'll see rapid intensification in those winds as we head through tomorrow morning and into midday. Here's a look at the surface chart now. We're looking at a 971 millibar low south and west of Kodiak. The frontal boundary is still well out over the water, but you can see that broad southerly flow making its way up to Prince William Sound. Saw a little bit of rain around Whittier and also around Homer and the western side of the Kenai Peninsula. Light rain continued around parts of southeast today. High pressure hovering northward is also tightening that pressure gradient for areas along the north slope and around Kaktovik. That's the reason you're seeing those gusty winds this afternoon. And low pressure again sitting out across the central Bering Sea. Now tonight, watch for some light chances for a little bit of rain and snow, maybe around the Pribilofs and parts of western St. Lawrence Island. The main precipitation will be occurring across areas around Haida Gwaii in the southern and eastern sections of southeast, and some of the higher terrain could probably see some areas of snow showers, but mostly limited at that level. Look for more of a northerly flow coming down to Cook Inlet, so it will be getting breezy, and some chances for rain and snow around Bristol Bay. Otherwise, rain for Kodiak and parts of the central Aleutians. Out to the west, you can see rain spreading northward quickly on the back side of the ridge. The combination of that ridge guiding that storm westward and north will continue to be in place as we head into Friday. Now by Friday, we're forecasting a 925 millibar low in the western Aleutians. That number should be significant because that is the lowest number that we have seen on any weather records around Alaska. So as far as things go, this would be a significant event. In Dutch Harbor, 1977, I believe, one of the vessels there inside of the Dutch Harbor itself actually reported that pressure reading of 925. It's very possible it could go lower than that and set a new record. We have a lot more instrumentation across the Bering and of course across the Aleutians, as well as many of your ships have instrumentation. So if you have a pressure reading or some weather reports you'd like to share, please submit those ship obs. We'd love to have them, but we sure hope that you're staying out of the way. We also have satellite imagery that will provide a great deal of information as the storm works into the Bering, and that will help us understand and do a better job forecasting the next one. Looking out across the western Gulf, a 984 millibar low continues that southerly flow in the north and northwestern sections of the Gulf. The winds are going to come up around Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait as we go through the day tomorrow, and moisture overspreading some of that cold will produce rain and snow chances for areas around Bristol Bay, but north of King Salmon, expect a better chance for snow, probably even a couple inches of snow as you head out toward Bethel. Now around some of the higher terrain of the Alaska Range, expect snow, but north of that, conditions are pretty dry. It may still be breezy around the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, but all in all, you'll see more clouds than anything else south of the Yukon, and north of that, it looks relatively clear and dry. Rain should start to take a break across southern parts of southeast tomorrow. It may still be breezy through the day, but things should be letting up. The main focus for attention then turns to the storm system crossing through the central Aleutians, and as that happens and the front moves through, do expect some very strong and possibly damaging gusts there for Adak and Atka. As we get into Saturday, across the eastern Gulf, low pressure continues to work its way northward. We've got another circulation here, this one far less intense than the last two that have moved through. Across south central, periods of rain and snow will be possible across the region. A better chance for rain as you get out toward Kodiak. And we meet up with our frontal boundary once again, now working through the Alaska Peninsula. Again, some gusty winds working through here, but we're not talking about the hurricane force winds with this part of the system. All of that is still focused out in the west, a 931 millibar low there, still north of Kiska and just north and east of Shemya and Attu. It will have rain and clouds and wind with it, but it looks like the worst of it will still be maintained generally offshore of Adak and Atka and north of Attu. The front should blow through the Pribilofs fairly quickly tomorrow. On the north side of that, there will still be some some snow and probably some stronger winds for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. However, the main impacts from this will not be along the southwestern coast, and we are not forecasting high winds for that region right now. The main focus for those hurricane-force winds are still out across the west. Look for most areas across the central and eastern interior to be relatively clear. The winds will even settle down a little bit more for the eastern Beaufort seacoast. And for most areas, especially north of the Bering Strait, you should have an offshore flow. This will not be an onshore push of water, but should be an offshore wind blowing for a good part of the weekend, not even just Saturday, but also Sunday and probably into the first part of the week. So those conditions as we see it now taking us into the first part of the weekend and where that typhoon remnant system is going. For southeast, look for temperatures in the lower to mid 40s across most areas this afternoon, cooling down quick. 39 up around Haines and Skagway, 38 for Yakutat, 30s and 40s for Prince William Sound. Valdez was only 34 today, 41 in Homer, 25 around Squetna with 31 in Anchorage. Glen Allen and around Gakona was around 10, 18 for Fairbanks and 4 in Eagle, 10 degrees around Fort Yukon this afternoon. Not terribly warm there. 7 up at AKwx Pass, but it did start out around 18 below earlier this morning, so that was an improvement. Temps in the single digits and teens for the Arctic coast, 13 in Kaktovik with some stronger winds today, and around Wainwright about 0 as you get out toward Shishmaref and areas in the Kotzebue Sound. Most areas were in the low to mid-teens, so not horribly rough today. 20 around the western tip of the Seward Peninsula in Tin City, 22 in Nome, 19 for Unalakleet. Grayling was showing temperatures in the teens, as well as McGrath at 11. Around Bethel today it was 19. Savunga was showing 30, about the same there for Dillingham. Most of the Alaska Peninsula was in the 30s and 40s. Sandpoint was hovering around 43, just 1 degree cooler than what we saw out in Kodiak. The Pribilofs were in the mid-30s and low to mid-40s for the central and western chain. As you look at overnight lows, it's going to be a cold night in the interior where skies are pretty clear tonight, anywhere from 5 to about 20 below, especially around Arctic Village. 2 above in Barrow, 19 for Nunivak Island, about 6 to 7 degrees for Bethel. Around Bristol Bay, mid to upper 20s, the Aleutians in the 30s and 40s, South Central in the 20s to low 30s, and for Southeast in the upper 30s and low to mid 40s with Kodiak Island near 38. High temperatures tomorrow will make it there into the mid 40s. Most of South Central will be in the mid to upper 30s. Southeast, mid to upper 40s with the interior likely in the 0 to about 5, maybe even 15 degree range there. Healy about 21 if you're headed toward the park. Low to mid single digits, let's say. Single digits for most of the Arctic coast. Barrow at 7, Kaktovik near 10, Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse about 6, Shishmaref in the mid-teens, 25 in Nome, and most of the west will see milder temperatures in the mid to upper 40s by a few degrees over today. IFR conditions are expected across some of the higher terrain around Haines and Skagway and north of Yakutat as we get into tomorrow, and around parts of Prince William Sound, including Porter's Pass. Out across the west, obviously, IFR conditions are expected around the storm system as it develops and intensifies across the western Bering and west of Kiska to about Shemianatu. Do expect some changes in visibility there. Your pass conditions show all clear for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass tomorrow. Things look pretty good there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see MVFR. Rainy Pass, we're calling visual. Same goes for Windy Pass, and Isabel Pass should be VFR throughout the day. Mentasta Pass, we expect to see VFR. Tanita Pass, marginal conditions should prevail through most of your Friday. And Porter's Pass, as you saw on the chart, looks like it holds over to MVFR, maybe going IFR by the afternoon. Chilkoot and White Pass, we still expect IFR conditions. The surface freezing line hasn't budged much. In fact, it's lifting northward across the western Bering with a surge of warmer air. The surface freezing line there just south of St. Matthew and hugging some of the higher terrain of southeast. Warmer air is lifting northward across the eastern Gulf, anywhere from 4 to as high as 6,000 feet. And you can see the warm air spreading northward across the western chain, that reaching 4,000 feet by tomorrow morning around Attu and Shemya. Icing potential is pretty high up there, though. It's a lot of warm air spreading northward quickly. You'll have to climb well above 10,000 feet to find any elevated threats. There is some icing potential across southwestern Alaska, generally above 10,000 feet, and we have some remaining moisture coming out of the Yukon and areas north of the Wrangell St. Elias. Some of that could reach light to isolated moderate, also pretty high up there at this point. Jet stream potential shows low pressure dropping southward quickly across the western Gulf, and this is helping to drive a lot of storm activity across southeastern Alaska right now. We have high pressure keeping the winds going across the eastern Beaufort seacoast, but it's also making room for low pressure to move quickly northward across the western Bering and into the Chukchi Sea. As this happens, it's going to energize the surface weather. This is like a child putting their hand on a top and giving it a little bit of an extra oomph at the surface, and that's exactly what the jet stream is doing, giving a little more spin and energy to the storm system down below at the surface. 9,000 feet, we can see those winds picking up anywhere from 70, 80, even 90 knots there, generally north of AKwx and points west around that circulation. We do have another circulation here south of Kodiak. The wind speeds on the east and south side are also potent, 45 knots or so. A little bit of a slower wind coming into areas closer to southeastern Alaska, and we'll say breezy at this point across the middle parts of Alaska and the interior and the west coast, 20 to 30 knots. Now at 3,000 feet, a little bit closer to the ground, you can still see an awful lot of wind moving through, anywhere from 55 to as high as 80 or 90 knots for the central and western chain surrounding that area of low pressure. The low south of Kodiak is also strong. Wind speeds there around 25 to 50 knots, and a broad southerly flow still sweeping through the eastern Gulf with wind speeds there between 30 and 55 knots, the strongest of which are much further south. Across the interior, wind speeds there generally south and southeast from 20 to about 25 knots. Turbulence potential. Expect more and more across the west and perhaps some areas along the southwest coast as we go into the weekend. But for the most part, the focus for extreme or isolated severe will probably be across the central and western chain. Of course, around that low pressure system in the western Gulf, including areas closer to Kodiak, you should watch for at least light and probably some occasional moderate below 6,000 feet. And across southern parts of southeast, generally below 6,000 feet with that fast-moving river of air there closer to the surface, and from about 3,000 feet especially below, you should watch for some chop in that region. So if you're in the west, watch the weather. If you're in the east, things should be improving. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back in a few minutes with the rest of your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Look for the Leonids next week. Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky tonight.
On Tuesday morning, November 18th, from midnight to dawn, we may get to see the annual Leonid meteor shower.
And this year, the moon is going to help by staying out of the way. Let's show you. If you're far from city lights on any clear moonless night, you're likely to see a few meteors, if you stay out long enough and keep looking up. Wait, there's more.
Meteors have long been called shooting stars because that's what they look like. But they're not really stars shooting across the sky. In fact, when you see a meteor, you're seeing a tiny speck of space debris, anywhere from the size of a grain of sand to pebble-sized. They slam into our Earth's atmosphere at such high speeds that friction with the gases in our Earth's atmosphere causes the air to glow.
So when you see a shooting star, you're actually seeing the gas atoms in our Earth's atmosphere glow all along the path that the space debris, the meteor, has traveled. So on any clear, dark, moonless night, you can see a handful of meteors if you have a lot of patience.
But about 12 times a year, we experience what we call a meteor shower. And every November, we have the Leonid meteor shower, so named because the meteors appear to radiate from the constellation Leo the Lion. Meteor showers are a bit different from the meteors you see every night, because the meteors in a meteor shower are predictable and are made up of comet debris.
You see, every time a comet passes through our solar system, it sheds some of its debris along its orbit. And if the Earth intersects with the comet's path, we'll get a meteor shower. Meteor showers are somewhat predictable because the Earth returns to about the same spot in space at the same time each year.
And every November, we plow into some of this debris trails of the comet, Tempel-Tuttle, a comet which visits the Sun every 33 years. And in the years just preceding or following Tempel-Tuttle's passage, we pass through denser debris trails, and we may experience meteor showers with greater than usual intensity, which we call meteor storms. The last storm from the Leonids was in 2002.
You never know when one of these storms may happen, but the best prediction to see some meteors this year for North America is to go out from 1 a.m. through dawn Tuesday the 18th.
That's the night of the 17th and morning of the 18th.
Face east where you'll see the planet Jupiter rising. And this year, Jupiter is very close to the point in the sky where the meteors will seem to originate.
Oh, maybe we should call them the Jupiter meteors this year.
Nah. But the head of Leo is left of Jupiter, and as the night goes on, Jupiter and the meteor radiant will rise higher and higher. The bright star Regulus will be below Jupiter.
Maybe you'll see a few really bright meteors with long trails.
Or maybe not.
And one more thing, the Leonids are the fastest of all meteors because we're hitting them nearly head-on. They slam into our Earth's atmosphere traveling at speeds of over 158,000 miles per hour.
And for those of you who aren't going to stay up all night, we have the planet Mars low in the southwest, just after sunset. Mars will be just above the star Nunki. Nunki is in the handle of the teapot of Sagittarius.
Mars will remain in the evening sky for the rest of the year, but will rapidly move toward the east. In only 2 weeks, Mars will leave the teapot behind, and a young crescent moon will join Mars on the evening of the 25th.
Back to the early morning sky on Tuesday the 18th. Be sure to get out and watch what may be a meteor shower radiating from Leo the Lion.
And just as dawn breaks, the pink planet Mercury will rise and join the show. So, happy meteor shower, maybe, and keep looking up.
Time for your marine forecast now in southeastern Alaska. Winds will stay up, especially around the Clarence Strait. Those storm force winds are expected to reach closer to 50 knots with 10-foot seas early in the day. And as we go through the rest of the day, a lot of those winds will begin to diminish. So a lot of what you're looking at here should be earlier in the day with winds from 35 to 40 knots up the coast and higher gusts possible. Seas in the north 17 to 18 feet. The Lynn Canal not terribly strong. Northerlies there at 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. Otherwise southeasterlies across the central and southern inner waterways as we go through Friday. By Saturday, winds are greatly improved and diminished across coastal areas. A southerly flow still wrapping up the coast from 20 knots there in most areas. More of an onshore flow out toward Craig. 10 to 12, even 13-foot seas across coastal regions. The winds in the Lynn Canal become southerly with a 3-foot sea and southeasterlies as you head a little bit further south toward Ketchikan and Metlakatla. 4-foot seas are expected there on Saturday. Across the Cook Inlet, winds are coming up tonight and will continue to be strong as we head through the daytime tomorrow. Close to storm force winds, high-end gales there south of Kenai to Homer, 40 to 45 knots, 12 to 14-foot seas there with higher gusts. And we do have storm force winds coming outside of Prince William Sound at 50 knots with 17-foot seas. You'll see those higher seas all the way down outside of Resurrection Bay and into areas east of the Barrens. 25-knot winds on either side of Kodiak Island and stronger winds inside of Prince William Sound from the east at 30 knots with a 7-foot sea. A little bit of improvement for Saturday. Still looking at northeasterly winds draining down through the Cook Inlet up to 25 knots there west and south of Kenai with a 9-foot sea. Southwesterlies inside of Shelikof Strait, and a broad southerly flow is developing there south of Seward all the way to Kodiak at 25 to 30 knots with 16-foot seas at their highest south of Seward, and easterlies diminish inside of Prince William Sound to 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. Across the Alaska Peninsula, northeasterlies at 30 knots inside of Bristol Bay, northerlies north of Cold Bay at 25 knots with 10 to 12-foot seas on the Pacific side at 20 to 30-knot winds there. Look for Saturday to see more of a southerly flow developing south of Sand Point. Those winds come up to 40 knots with a 15-foot sea. South and southwesterly winds working into Bristol Bay at 30 to 35 knots, 13-foot seas there south and west of Castle Cape. Across the Aleutians now, tomorrow looks to be the big day for the western Aleutians as winds come up to hurricane force. 70-knot winds are expected on the Bering Sea side. 19 to 29-foot seas develop and 23 to 39-foot seas develop. Now there will be some areas that are likely looking at 50-foot seas there north of the Aleutians as we get into Friday night and Saturday. So these numbers are not reflective of some of the worst conditions that we expect to develop again Friday night and into Saturday, generally north of the chain, north of Kiska, and north of Chemianatu. We're looking at storm force winds around Kiska at 55 knots with a 21-foot sea there. Southerlies blowing through Adak and Atka in the coastal areas, 12 to 15-foot seas. And you're still looking at the effects of high pressure driving a north and westerly flow through the central and eastern chain. Winds there 25 to 30 knots and seas 10 to 13 feet. By Saturday, winds are diminishing somewhat in the western chain down to 50 to 60 knots. Still looking at storm force winds and certainly some higher gusts with seas ranging from 40 to 43 feet. Southwesterlies take over the central and eastern chain, 30 to 45 knots there from Adak to Unalaska. On the Pacific side, you're looking at 16 to as high as 35 feet. Across the Bering side, 18 to 26 feet. Once again, if you are not in shelter at this point in the west, you need to be moving quickly to safer shelter. And again, that will continue as we go into Saturday and probably Sunday as well, as many of those swells are moving from southwest to north and east. Here's a look at the west coast now. For southeast around St. Lawrence Island, 20 knots with a 6-foot sea. Southeasterlies moving over Nunivak Island. Northerlies coming out of the Kuskokwim, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. Light winds across the Pribilofs for Friday. Not too bad. Don't be fooled, though. 9-foot seas are coming in, and north to St. Matthew, 15 knots with a 10-foot sea expected on Friday. By Saturday, the winds are coming up around St. Matthew, 40 knots with a 23-foot sea. Look for southerlies across the Pribilofs with 18-foot seas. There, southeasterlies coming up the west coast. We're not expecting a lot of impacts initially around the southwestern coast, though it will be breezy. There may be some times of MVFR and IFR conditions heading into the weekend, and probably some turbulence, but the worst of the weather is going to be well to your west. Here's a look at the north now, and this is also another opportunity to say offshore winds will probably be helping Kotzebue Sound. A south and easterly flow predominant for Friday. 30-knot winds with a 7-foot sea. Look for southeasterlies across most of the Arctic coast, anywhere from 15 but as high as 30 knots there as you look out toward Kaktovik. Breezy conditions there continue as we head through tonight with a winter weather advisory still in effect. Saturday, look for southeasterlies blowing off of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. Easterlies blowing out of Kotzebue Sound at 25 knots from the east, a 7-foot sea. Winds are a little bit lower out around Barrow and Wainwright, also north of Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, and southeasterlies continue around 25 knots for Kaktovik. Recapping the weather, the worst of the weather right now is in the Gulf of Alaska. 979 millibars, a low south of Kodiak is pushing a frontal boundary up along the coast, and winds will be coming up all around the coastline tonight and into tomorrow. More rain is possible for southeast, snow at higher elevations around coastal areas, and probably some rain for the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island. By tomorrow, low pressure makes its presence known across the western Bering as the storm drops to 925 millibars. High wind warnings are posted for the western part of the Aleutians, and hurricane force wind warnings are posted for the marine areas closer to the western Aleutians. Periods of rain and snow will develop in southwest, and the storm system continues across the west by Saturday. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.